At 10:36 that Tuesday morning, Dr. Evelyn Voss ordered a single-dad custodian out of St. Elian's Pediatric MRI wing for rewriting an evacuation map. 4 minutes later, the lights dimmed, smoke touched the east corridor, and the only person who knew how to move the children safely was the man she had just thrown out. St. Elian Children's Medical Center had the polished calm of a place built to reassure frightened families, and on most mornings the fourth-floor pediatric imaging wing succeeded at exactly that. The walls were painted in soft ocean colors. Paper fish drifted from the ceiling above the waiting area. A mural of a smiling moon wrapped around the entrance to the MRI corridor, as if machinery could be made less frightening by pretending it belonged to a bedtime story. Parents sat beneath recessed lights with coffee gone cold in paper cups. Children clutched blankets, stuffed animals, plastic bracelets from admissions. Behind the mural and the glass doors, however, the wing was still what it truly was, a tightly controlled high-risk environment filled with magnetically sensitive equipment, sealed rooms, oxygen lines, sedated patients, and protocols that only looked simple from the outside. Marcus Hale knew that better than most people who wore far more expensive shoes than his. Officially, Marcus was a night shift custodian assigned to pediatric imaging and 2 adjacent surgical corridors. On paper, that meant floor sanitation, waste transfer, restocking linens, and reporting maintenance concerns. In practice, it meant he knew which automatic doors lagged by half a second when humidity rose, which hallway seals swelled in winter, which storage alcove still carried the faint smell of solvent from a renovation 6 years earlier, and which families needed a quiet extra blanket at 3 o'clock in the morning because fear made children cold even when the temperature did not. He was 36 years old, broad-shouldered without looking imposing, with the kind of tired face that came not from carelessness, but from repeated short nights. His work shoes were always clean, even when the rest of him looked lived in. He moved through the hospital with the silent efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that the loudest people in institutions were rarely the ones holding them together. Most physicians knew him only by sight. A few nurses knew better. They knew he noticed things. They knew he remembered details. They knew that if Marcus Hale said a cart should not be left near a threshold, or a valve cabinet should not be blocked with disposable supply bins, it was easier to listen the first time than regret it later. Outside the hospital, he was the sole parent of 8-year-old Lily Hale, a narrow-faced, observant child who had inherited his stillness and none of his ability to hide what she felt. She spent weekday mornings in the hospital's staff child room for an hour and a half before school when shifts overlapped badly and there was no one else to take her. Marcus hated that arrangement, though he never said so. It was clean, supervised, and practical. It also meant Lily had learned far too early how adults looked when they were exhausted and pretending not to be. That Tuesday began with the kind of strain that made small mistakes more likely. Overnight rain had turned to sleet before dawn. 2 transport aides had called in sick. The main loading dock lift had stalled for 23 minutes just after 6. In pediatric imaging, the morning schedule was already overbooked because one of the MRI suites had been down the previous afternoon, forcing 9 children into a compressed rescheduling block. Sedation teams were moving quickly, parents were tense, nurses were trying to sound unhurried while counting minutes in their heads. Marcus had been awake since 4:40. He had made Lily oatmeal in the apartment kitchen while reviewing a crumpled note from school about a science project due Friday. He had found one of her socks under the couch, braided her hair badly but acceptably on the second attempt, and carried her backpack and his own lunch in the same hand while locking the apartment door with the other. By the time they reached St. Elian's through the employee entrance, Lily was leaning into his side with the sleepy trust of a child who assumes her father will absorb the shape of the day before it reaches her. She looked up at the hospital's glass facade, then at him. "Are we late?" "No," Marcus said. "We're just not early." That satisfied her. It usually did. He left her in the child room on the second floor with her purple notebook, a sharpened pencil, and strict instructions to finish the drawing she had started the night before. It was a map of something, though she had not explained of what. Lily liked maps, not treasure maps in the ordinary sense. Floor maps, bus maps, zoo maps, any drawing that turned confusion into arrows and rooms and exits. Marcus had once shown her a fire egress plan posted in their apartment building lobby, and she had stared at it for 10 full minutes, as though it were a story written in another language she intended to learn. By 7:15, he was back in pediatric imaging with a rolling cart, fresh liners, and a folded packet of laminated papers under one arm. The laminated pages were not part of his custodial assignment. That was the first thing people like Dr. Evelyn Voss tended to notice. Dr. Voss had taken over as chief of pediatric surgery 9 months earlier, after a celebrated tenure in Boston and a fellowship people in medicine still mentioned by name. She was 42, exact in posture, exact in language, and exact in the kind of authority that does not need to raise its voice often because it has spent years teaching rooms to quiet themselves first. Her reputation for brilliance was deserved. So was her reputation for impatience. She believed in systems, but only the ones she trusted. She believed in competence, but mainly when it arrived wearing the correct badge. To those beneath her, she could be controlled, polished, and devastating in a single sentence. That morning, she entered the MRI wing with 2 residents, a sedation nurse, and the clipped momentum of someone already dissatisfied with the day. Marcus was near the inner corridor outside Suite B, crouched beside a wall display panel. One of the laminated pages was open in his hands. It showed a revised evacuation route in color-coded lines: blue for ambulatory staff, green for patient transport, red for oxygen risk bypass, yellow for magnetic hazard perimeter. He was comparing it to the hallway sightline, measuring with his eyes the clearance around a newly placed supply cabinet that facilities had installed the previous week. He did not hear Dr. Voss approach until her shadow crossed the page. "What exactly are you doing?" Marcus stood at once, checking the revised pathing around the B corridor. "Doctor." One of the residents glanced at the laminated sheet, then at Marcus's uniform, and said nothing. The silence had a shape. It was the shape of people waiting to see how far someone would be allowed to overstep. "Doctor." Voss held out her hand. Marcus gave her the page. She scanned it once, her expression changing not into confusion but into a colder version of certainty. At the bottom of the page, beneath a hospital logo and a facility stamp from 3 months earlier, was a name written in small block letters: M. Hale. Her eyes lifted. "This is an evacuation map." "Yes." "For the pediatric MRI wing." "Yes, doctor." A beat passed. "And why," she asked, "is a custodian revising evacuation maps for a restricted pediatric imaging zone?" Marcus did not shift under the question. He rarely did. "I flagged a conflict after the storage relocation in Corridor B. The old route pinches at the turn if transport beds stack there. Facilities asked me to mark what I was seeing on nights. Safety office said they'd review it." The second resident made the mistake of looking faintly amused. To him, this was already becoming a story about boundaries. Marcus, the janitor with opinions. Dr. Voss, about to correct the atmosphere. Dr. Voss looked again at the map, then at the corridor beyond it, then back at Marcus. She had mistaken what she was seeing for presumption. In her mind, order depended on role clarity. Surgeons handled surgery, safety officers handled safety, custodians cleaned. Anything else felt like drift. And drift in a hospital was dangerous. "No," she said. Marcus said nothing. "No one in environmental services is going to redesign movement inside my MRI wing based on personal impressions from the night shift. Do you understand me?" He chose his words carefully. "It wasn't personal, doctor. It was based on bed width, door swing, and the new cabinet placement." Her gaze sharpened. Not anger. Worse, dismissal with structure. "You are not part of this clinical chain. You are not part of imaging command. And you are absolutely not going to stand outside an active pediatric suite with self-made emergency documents in your hands while sedated children are being moved through this corridor. He could have said that the maps were reviewed drafts, not self-made. He could have pointed to the facility's stamp. He could have said that 2 charge nurses had already asked for copies. He did not. He had a daughter downstairs. He had rent due in 9 days. He had learned the cost of being right in the wrong tone. Doctor Voss handed the map back as though returning something mildly contaminated. "Leave the wing," she said, "now, and if you have concerns about signage or layout, you submit them through maintenance, not by inserting yourself into medical operations." One of the nurses at the far desk looked up. A transporter slowed near the doorway. The room did not stop, but it listened. Marcus took the page. "There's a blind turn problem by Suite B if I said leave." The corridor went quiet. He said nothing after that. He folded the laminated sheet once, then again slipped it beneath the others, and moved his cart aside so the sedation team could pass. There are moments when power reveals itself by speaking. This was one of them. There are other moments when dignity reveals itself by not competing with it. This was one of those. As he turned toward the exit doors, he saw Lily at the far end of the outer hall. She had come up from the child room with her notebook in both hands, escorted halfway by a volunteer who had apparently been pulled away by another family. She was small in the corridor, winter coat still on, backpack hanging from one shoulder, watching her father with the careful stillness of a child who understood from the posture of adults that something had gone wrong. Marcus's expression changed only once that morning. It softened. He crossed to her, crouched, and adjusted the slipping backpack strap. "You're supposed to be downstairs." "I know," Lily said quietly. Miss Renee got busy. Then she looked at the laminated pages under his arm. "Did they not want your map?" A beat passed. Behind him, the MRI wing doors opened and closed again with their sealed hydraulic hush. Dr. Voss was already moving on, already speaking to a resident about sedation timing as if the interruption had been administrative and therefore finished. Marcus looked at his daughter. "Not today," he said. Lily absorbed that without complaint. She held up her notebook a little higher. "I made one too," she said. Lily opened the notebook to a page filled with careful pencil lines. It was a floor plan of the second level as she understood it from memory. The child room, the vending alcove, the elevator bank, the long turn toward imaging. A square she had labeled staff only and then crossed out because she was not sure if she was allowed to write it. At the bottom corner she had drawn a tiny stick figure with dark hair and a rectangle in his hand. "That's you," she said. "You're showing people where to go." Marcus looked at the page for 1 second longer than he intended. Children have a way of making visible the shape of a life adults have learned to compress. In Lily's drawing, he was not a custodian. He was not night shift. He was not the man people overlooked until they needed something moved. He was simply the person who knew the building when others did not. He closed the notebook gently. "It's a good map." She studied his face. "But they still didn't want yours." "No," he said. Lily nodded once, the way she did when something disappointed her but did not surprise her. Then she slipped her hand into his. "Do I go back downstairs now?" "Yes." He walked her to the elevator himself. On the ride down, she leaned against his arm and did not ask the question children usually asked when they wanted an adult to make hurt smaller. She did not say, "Why were they mean?" She did not say, "Did you do something wrong?" She had already learned that adults often dislike being seen too clearly. Instead, she asked, "Will you still know the way if they don't use your paper?" Marcus almost smiled. "I'll still know the way." The second floor opened with its usual morning noise. Volunteers, rolling carts, a television mounted too high, tuned to a children's channel nobody was really watching. He left Lily with Miss Renee, who apologized twice for losing track of her. Marcus told her it was fine. He meant it only in the practical sense. Then he went back upstairs with the folded laminates under his arm, and a silence inside him that had become familiar over the years. Not anger, not exactly. The more durable thing beneath it. The rest of the morning moved quickly. A 6-year-old with a fractured humerus cried through registration. A sedated infant was transferred from pre-op to imaging under heated blankets. A resident dropped a sealed tray and swore under his breath. Marcus mopped, cleared bins, changed out a leaking linen hamper, and kept noticing the same obstruction near Corridor B every time transport beds accumulated for more than a few minutes. The new supply cabinet had narrowed the turning radius exactly as he had said it would. 1 bed could pass. 2 created friction. 3 created delay. He marked the times in his head. At 8:42, a transport team bringing in a pediatric sedation case had to back up and re-angle because the rear wheel clipped a parked 4 stand. At 9:07, a parent carrying a toddler and trailing an oxygen pole had to flatten herself against the wall while 2 clinicians maneuvered around the cabinet edge. At 9:26, one of the imaging nurses muttered, "This corner is ridiculous," to nobody in particular. Marcus heard it and said nothing. Only later would most of them understand that the building had already begun to prove him right. By 10:15, the weather had worsened. Sleet rattled softly against the sealed windows on the east side of the hospital. The emergency department was backing up with weather-related falls and 2 pediatric respiratory transfers from a regional clinic. On the 4th floor, MRI Suite A was running 12 minutes behind. Suite B had a sedated oncology patient scheduled at 10:40, a 7-year-old boy named Noah Levin whose scans needed contrast, monitoring support, and a clear route because he was being moved with portable oxygen after a complicated overnight desaturation episode. Noah's mother arrived carrying the exhausted composure of someone who had already spent too many nights in hospitals. His father was parking the car. The boy himself, pale beneath his knit cap, rode on the transport bed with a stuffed fox tucked beneath one arm, and the solemn patience some children develop when machines and adults have been discussing their bodies for too long. Marcus noticed the oxygen tank bracket first. One of the securing straps had been fastened badly. Not dangerously yet, but badly. The cylinder could wobble if the bed had to pivot too sharply. He stepped toward the transport nurse. "That lower strap's loose," she looked, adjusted it, and gave him a quick nod. "Thanks." He moved on. That was how most of his best work happened. Quietly, before anyone decided it counted. At 10:31, Dr. Voss returned to the imaging wing from surgery, now with only 1 resident and a phone in her hand. She was speaking to hospital administration about a staffing conflict in pediatric recovery when she passed the same corridor where she had dismissed Marcus 3 hours earlier. Her stride did not slow. Her attention was split cleanly between the call and the movement around her. She saw the wing as functional again. Ordered. Restored to the correct hierarchy. What she did not see, not yet, was the way the waiting area had thickened with delay. 2 transport beds were now staged near the turn. A mobile monitor sat on standby against the wall. The recently installed supply cabinet still narrowed the corner. A volunteer had parked a toy cart in the wrong place near the mural entrance. The corridor was not blocked. Not technically, it was becoming something worse. A narrowing corridor is dangerous precisely because it does not look like a disaster until movement matters. At 10:36, the first signal came from below, not an alarm. A smell, faint at first. Heated plastic, then something sharper beneath it. Anyone who has spent years in institutions knows that buildings speak before they shout. A burned motor has one smell. Overheated wiring another. Steam line pressure something else entirely. Marcus caught it near the service alcove outside imaging and stopped mid-step. He looked toward the ceiling vent, then toward the fire door at the east stairwell, then down at the floor, where the air pressure changed so slightly that nobody without long habit would have noticed. He left his cart where it was and moved toward the stairwell door. By then, one of the maintenance lights above the corridor junction had flickered once, not enough to draw attention. Enough to confirm a pattern. He opened the fire door. Warm air hit his face, not flames, not smoke thick enough to trigger panic, but the unmistakable beginning of an electrical event somewhere below the fourth-floor service chase. He pulled the door shut at once and reached for the nearest wall phone. At the imaging desk, a nurse looked up. "What is it?" Marcus was already dialing internal facilities emergency. Possible electrical heat in East Service Stack, 4th floor. Imaging side. Get safety up here now. The nurse stood. Dr. Voss ended her call mid-sentence and turned. "What happened?" Marcus looked toward the corridor, calculating distances, volume, bed widths, door swing, the kind of math buildings demand from the people who keep them alive. East stairwell stack is heating. If smoke pushes through the chase, this wing loses the clean route first. One of the residents frowned. "How would you know that?" Marcus did not answer him. He was looking at the transport bed staging near Corridor B. Then the overhead lights dimmed. Just once. A beat passed. The MRI warning panel near Suite A blinked amber, reset, then held. Now the room listened. A facilities supervisor answered on the wall phone below. Marcus spoke fast, precise, no wasted language. "You need safety and electrical on East Stack now. And if this trips ventilation isolation, pediatric imaging has a choke point at B corridor." Dr. Voss stepped closer. "Is there active smoke?" "Not in the wing yet." "Then we do not evacuate sedated pediatric patients on a smell." "No," Marcus said. "You move before the smell becomes smoke." The sentence landed harder than she expected. Not because of its wording, because of the absolute absence of deference in it. Not rudeness. Urgency. The nurse at the desk looked between them. No 11's transport team had just arrived at the turn. Bed. Oxygen. Monitor. Mother beside them. Behind them, another patient transfer was approaching from pre-op. Too much movement. Too little space. Dr. Voss's jaw tightened. She was still the highest authority in the corridor. She was also, for the first time that day, no longer entirely certain the corridor belonged to her understanding of it. "What exactly are you recommending?" Marcus pointed once. "Clear the toy cart. Move the standby monitor to the alcove. Reverse Suite B entry staging. Send ambulatory families west through the consult hall now. Keep the sedated transports from stacking at the turn. If east vents push smoke, this corner locks." A beat passed. Nobody moved. Then the first detector chirped. Not the full alarm. A single pre-alert tone from deeper in the service hallway. Every head turned. Noah's mother gripped the bed rail. "What does that mean?" Before anyone could answer, a low institutional voice sounded overhead. "Attention. Facilities response to East Service Corridor. Stand by for further instruction." Stand by. The two most dangerous words in a building that has already begun to fail. Marcus did not wait for permission. He moved the toy cart himself, dragged the standby monitor 3 feet back into the alcove, and gestured to the nearest transporter. "Angle that bed now. Don't nose into the turn." The transporter obeyed because the command sounded like competence, not status. That was the moment the room began to divide. Not officially. Instinctively. Some people still looked to Dr. Voss for authority. Others had started looking to Marcus for geometry. The nurse at the desk was the first to commit. "West Hall for ambulatory families," she called. "Let's move." A volunteer guided 2 waiting parents toward the consult corridor. A second transporter reversed Noah's bed half a length. The resident who had smirked earlier grabbed the 4-pole without being asked. Dr. Voss saw all of it happen in under 6 seconds. Then the fire doors at the far east junction released with a hard magnetic click. Smoke did not pour through. It threaded in. Thin, gray, fast, carried by pressure. Marcus looked once and knew. "Too late for the old route," he said. No one argued after that. "West route," Marcus said, already moving. Now, the corridor obeyed him before it fully understood why. That was the strange thing about real competence. It did not always arrive with credentials. Sometimes it arrived with the calm voice of the one person who had been paying attention long before the emergency made paying attention fashionable. Noah Levin's bed was the first problem. Sedated, portable oxygen, monitor line, narrow turn. His mother frozen beside the rail with one hand pressed to her mouth. Marcus reached the foot of the bed, checked the wheel locks with one glance, then pointed to the resident on the left side. "You take the pole. Keep it tight to the frame." To the transport nurse, "You stay on the tank. No drift." To Noah's mother, and his voice changed there, becoming lower, steadier. The way people speak when panic has to be denied a place to stand. "Stay by his shoulder. Talk to him. He may not answer, but children hear more than we think." She nodded immediately. Dr. Voss was beside them now. For the first time that morning, she was not speaking over him. She was watching him calculate the corridor the way she herself read a surgical field. Angles, sequence, exposure, constraint. It was the same mental discipline in a different uniform. The overhead system chimed again. "Attention! Partial smoke isolation in East Service Stack. Clinical staff initiate local relocation protocols. Not full evacuation. Not yet. The kind of half-measure institutions prefer when they are still hoping the problem will remain small." Marcus did not slow. "That means we have minutes, not options." He turned the bed himself, not by force but by exact placement. One wheel over, 2 inches back. Pivot on the rear axle, clear the cabinet edge, avoid the monitor cart, keep the oxygen bracket off the wall. The movement was so precise that the resident later would not be able to explain why it looked easy, only that it had. They cleared the turn. Behind them, another transport team tried to follow too quickly and jammed at the narrowing corridor. A father with a toddler in dinosaur pajamas stepped back into the wall. Someone dropped a clipboard. The smoke thickened by a degree too small for panic and too large to ignore. Marcus looked over his shoulder. "One bed at a time. If you stack here, nobody moves." Dr. Voss turned and snapped into command at last, but now her command was aligned to his geometry rather than her earlier assumptions. "You heard him. Stop crowding the turn. Ambulatory patients to the West Consult Hall. Sedation cases hold spacing. Move." Nobody missed the pronoun. Him. The room changed. The West Consult Hall was longer but cleaner, a secondary route that curved around imaging offices, crossed a service junction, and descended toward the pediatric recovery elevators. It was not the official primary path because it required tighter timing and cleaner staging. It was, however, the route on Marcus's laminated map. The one Dr. Voss had dismissed in front of half the wing. Only later would she understand that he had not revised the route because he wanted authority. He had revised it because he knew exactly how buildings failed under pressure. They reached the first set of cross doors just as the lights dipped a second time. Harder now, enough to pull a sound from the waiting parents. Monitors switched briefly to battery. A child began to cry somewhere behind them. Marcus checked the magnetic hold on the cross door, then the sightline beyond it. Blocked. A linen cart had been left half across the west junction. He did not swear. He simply moved. 2 hands on the frame, shift left, brake release with his knee, push through the threshold, clear the path. Dr. Voss saw the efficiency of it, and something colder than embarrassment passed through her. Recognition. She had spent the morning treating him as if he were standing too close to systems he did not understand. Now those same systems were revealing, point by point, that he understood them better than anyone else in the corridor. Noah's mother was still speaking softly to her son. "You're okay, baby. We're moving, that's all. You're okay." The stuffed fox had slipped near his elbow. Marcus picked it up and set it back against the blanket without breaking stride. Small things mattered in emergencies. Children knew that before adults did. At the service junction ahead, a security officer appeared at last, breathless and late. "We're getting reports of smoke migration from third-floor electrical." Marcus pointed behind him. "Then don't stand there. Hold the rear traffic and keep families off the east turn." The officer hesitated for the smallest fraction of a second, registering the uniform. Then Dr. Voss said sharply, "Do it." He moved. They were 20 feet from the recovery elevators when the real complication arrived. One of the elevator banks failed and blinked out. A groan moved through the hall. The remaining car showed occupied. Descending slowly from 7, Marcus looked at the sedated child. The oxygen. The narrowing time. Then toward the fire stair access at the far wall. Not ideal. Never ideal with pediatric transport. But possible if controlled. He was already calculating whether Noah's bed could clear the landing turn when the surviving elevator doors opened. Inside was Lily, not alone. Miss Renee stood behind her with 3 children from the child room, all wearing small visitor badges, all wide-eyed, all being moved preemptively away from the second floor because smoke odor had started drifting through a lower mechanical corridor. Lily stepped out first, purple notebook clutched to her chest, and saw her father at the head of a sedated boy's bed in a corridor full of alarms, parents, and smoke-threaded light. She did not run to him. That was the kind of child she was. She simply stopped, held his eyes, and waited to see what her role in the moment needed to be. Marcus's face changed again, though only slightly. Miss Renee looked overwhelmed. "They told us to come up and wait here until someone—" "No," Marcus said at once. "Not here." He looked to Dr. Voss. "Recovery playroom. West side. Clean air doors." Dr. Voss turned to the nearest nurse. "Take them, now." Then Lily spoke. Quiet but clear. "The other elevator smells bad." Every adult near her looked down. She lifted the notebook. It was open to her hand-drawn floor map from that morning. She pointed at a square she had labeled with a wavering pencil line. "The smell was here first," she said, tapping the lower junction near the east lift lobby. "And then in the hall with the blue chairs." A beat passed. Marcus understood immediately. The smoke migration was not moving evenly. It was climbing through the east stack and curling into the lower lift lobby before reaching the west side, which meant the remaining elevator might not stay safe for long. He looked at Dr. Voss. She looked at the notebook, then at him. Nobody laughed. "Stairs," Marcus said. For 1 second, the entire hall resisted the word. Stairs meant effort, risk, manual control. No easy machine to carry the problem for them. Then Dr. Voss nodded once. "Use the west stair." That was the full reversal. Not apology. Not yet. Something more operational, and in the moment, more important, trust. The west stairwell was clear, pressurized, and wider than the east. Marcus led Noah's bed to the landing, checked the descent angle, then called for straps at the lower frame. 2 transporters moved into position. Dr. Voss took the head herself. The resident nearest her looked startled. She did not acknowledge him. "On my count," Marcus said. "Slow. Keep level. Do not chase the weight." They began the descent. The movement was brutal on the arms and exact on the nerves. Sedated child, portable oxygen, monitor battery, narrow landings, 1 floor down, pivot, breathe, reset, another half flight. Marcus controlled the lower end and called each turn before it came. Dr. Voss matched him without wasted motion. By the second landing, sweat had broken at her temple. By the third, she understood something with complete clarity. He had not come there to impress anyone. He had come there because if he did not do this well, children got hurt. When they reached pediatric recovery, clean air met them like a wall. Nurses took Noah's bed. His mother began to cry only after the handoff was complete. The delayed shaking sob of a person who had postponed fear until someone competent made it safe to feel. Marcus stepped back at once. He always did after the crucial part was over, but the morning was not finished. Families were still being rerouted from imaging. Staff still needed direction. Smoke control teams were now pushing the 4th floor into partial closure. and in the center of the recovery corridor stood Lily, one hand in Miss Renee's notebook still open, watching her father as if the entire building had just confirmed something she had known all along. Dr. Voss looked at the child, then at the crude pencil map, then at the man she had thrown out of her wing for holding the professional version of the same idea. The room went quiet in a different way now. Not fear, recognition. The safety officer arrived 3 minutes later with 2 facilities managers and a hospital administrator whose tie was slightly crooked from moving too fast. They began asking questions in the clipped language institutions use when they are already assembling liability and chronology. Who identified the migration first? Who redirected the corridor? Why was West Consult used instead of primary East clearance? The imaging nurse answered before anyone else could. Marcus Hale did. The administrator turned. His eyes moved over the custodian uniform, then to Dr. Voss, expecting correction. He did not get it. Dr. Voss, still breathing harder than she preferred, said, "Mr. Hale identified the root conflict this morning. I failed to listen." He was right. No one spoke after that. It was not a dramatic confession. She did not soften it. She did not dilute it into process language. In some ways that made it heavier. The administrator asked, "He identified it this morning." Dr. Voss looked at the laminated pages still tucked beneath Marcus's arm, edges bent now, one corner smudged from the stair rail. "He revised the evacuation path after the Corridor B cabinet installation," she said. "I removed him from the wing before reading what he had actually found." A beat passed. By then, it was already too late for anyone to pretend the hierarchy had functioned correctly on its own. The facilities manager took the laminated sheets from Marcus with the care of someone who now understood they were not unofficial scribbles but a prevented disaster wearing cheap plastic. He scanned the markings, then the timestamps, then the root notes. "These are accurate," he said quietly. Marcus answered in the same tone he had used all day. They needed one more clearance point by the West Junction. Linen cart shouldn't have been there either. The manager nodded like a chastened student. Lily tugged once at her father's sleeve. Did they want the map now? A few people heard it. Nobody looked away. Marcus crouched to her height despite the ache in his arms. "Yeah," he said. "They want it now." She considered that, then held out her notebook to Dr. Voss. The surgeon hesitated only a moment before taking it. Inside, on the page with the child's floor plan, the little rectangle in Marcus's hand had been redrawn darker. Beside it, in careful block letters, Lily had written, "He knows the way." Dr. Voss read the words once. Then again. There are moments when arrogance collapses loudly. This was not one of them. This one happened in silence, in a recovery corridor that smelled faintly of disinfectant and warm plastic, while a tired surgeon held a child's notebook and understood, with humiliating precision, exactly what she had mistaken for overreach that morning. Not ambition, responsibility. By early afternoon, the 4th floor imaging wing was closed pending electrical inspection. The smoke event was contained before open flame, but the East Service chase had suffered a motor failure severe enough to justify a full systems review. Internal reports began. Statements were taken. Route protocols were examined. The new supply cabinet was tagged for immediate relocation. Marcus was asked to stay, not by facilities first, by Dr. Voss. She found him near the recovery lounge vending machines an hour later. Lily asleep in a chair, with her backpack under her legs and her purple notebook resting against her coat. He was holding a paper cup of coffee he had forgotten to drink. For a moment, Dr. Voss simply looked at them. The father awake because he had to be. The child asleep because she trusted the awake part of the world to him. Then she spoke. "Mr. Hale, Mr. Hale." He turned. She had changed out of her surgical jacket. Without it, she looked slightly less armored and much more tired. "I owe you an apology." Marcus said nothing. "I spoke to you this morning, as if proximity to the work was the same thing as understanding it. She glanced once toward Lily, then back to him. It was my mistake, a dangerous one. He did not make it easy for her by rescuing the moment. After a second, he said, "The route needed fixing." "Yes," she said. "It did." Another beat passed. "For the record," she added, "the hospital will be using your route." He looked at the sleeping child in the chair beside him. Good. That single word seemed to affect her more than a larger response would have, because it confirmed the thing she had been forced to learn in the stairwell. He was not interested in winning the interaction, only in whether the right thing got done. Dr. Voss lowered her voice. "There's going to be a formal review. Safety, facilities, administration. I've already told them your name needs to be on it." Marcus nodded once. Then, after a pause, she said the one sentence that mattered most because it cost her the most to say. "I should have listened before the building made me." The vending machine hummed softly. Somewhere down the hall, a child laughed, the bright, relieved laugh that only appears after adults have stopped sounding afraid. Marcus looked at Dr. Voss for a long moment and saw that the sentence was not polished for effect. It was simply true. "That would have been easier," he said. For the first time that day, the corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile exactly, the beginning of one, restrained by shame and respect and exhaustion all at once. When Lily woke 20 minutes later, she found her father still there, and the chief surgeon kneeling beside her chair, returning the purple notebook with both hands. Dr. Voss said, "Your map helped." Lily blinked sleep from her eyes, and accepted this as if it were the most natural outcome in the world. "I know," she said. Marcus looked away then, just briefly, because sometimes pride is sharp enough to resemble pain. By evening, the hospital had quieted into its second rhythm. The dangerous part was over. Reports would continue, meetings would follow, titles would shift around the truth, the way titles always did. But one thing had already changed in a way that could not be fully undone. On the 4th floor of St. Elian Children's Medical Center, people now looked at Marcus Hale differently, not like a custodian who had wandered too close to systems above his station, like the man who had seen the turn before anyone else, like the person who knew the way. And when he finally left the building with Lily's hand in his and the folded laminated route tucked under his arm, the winter air outside felt clean and ordinary again. Lily looked up at him beneath the hospital lights. "Are you sad now?" He thought about the morning, the corridor, the dismissal, the stairwell, the notebook in Dr. Voss's hands. Then he looked down at his daughter. "No," he said. "Just tired." She nodded, satisfied by the honesty of it, and slipped her mittened hand more firmly into his. They walked toward the bus stop through the fading light. A father carrying the map no one wanted until it mattered, and a child who had known from the beginning what the adults needed longer to learn.